Hi, this is Josh from SDM, and in this video we're going to show you the basics of using Photoshop. I am using a Windows computer here, so I probably will be mentioning Windows keys. You can look up the equivalents for a Mac operating system, but the concepts should be pretty consistent throughout. I already have Photoshop downloaded on this computer, and this is what it looks like when you first open it. In order to get Photoshop, you can either subscribe to the Creative Cloud subscription service, so you pay month to month and you get access to a whole suite of Adobe's different creative applications. I believe you can also buy a standalone version, which will not require you to have a subscription. I believe it is reduced in terms of its functionality. It's called Photoshop Elements. And then if you do not want to commit to either of those options, I believe you can also get a 30-day free trial of Creative Cloud. So you can try this out for 30 days without having to commit to paying for anything for Photoshop. So when you first open Photoshop, this is what it looks like here. I already have the program downloaded. So when I open Photoshop, I can either open an existing file or I can create a new file. Let's start with opening an existing file. So when I click Open, I can say, I want to open something on my computer, and I'll just click on my desktop, and I have a picture of the sky here. I'll just click Open on that. So I've selected my picture I want to open, and I'll click Open. This will open this photo in Photoshop. So there's a lot going on in Photoshop. Over in the bottom right, we can see a Layers tab here. This shows the different layers that I have in this document. And as you can see, when I opened one, it became the background layer for this document. And there's a little lock here, which means that I cannot make any changes to this layer if I want to. It's locked. Now, there's a couple interesting things. When we import a photo, we can go up to Image and look at our image size. So this will tell us how large this image is that we've imported here. So you can see that it has a width and a height. Now this is in pixels. I could view it in different measurements if I wanted to check how big this will be in inches. I'm going to stick with pixels for now. This is sort of something you have to think about if this is going to be destined for a digital display or if it's actually going to be printed. We can talk about that a little further on when we're creating images. So I'm just going to say OK for now. So this tells me a little bit about this image, its size, its width, its height, and its resolution. Now the image is placed on a canvas, right? So the canvas by default will be the same size, but let's say I wanted my canvas to be a little bit larger. So I could go up to Image, and I just looked at the image size. Now let's look at the canvas size. So the canvas size, it's right now in inches. I'll move it to pixels, but this is the exact same size, right? The canvas is based on the image that I imported. But let's say I wanted to extend this canvas. Now this is where this canvas will be anchored. So I'm gonna click on the top left corner. That means that if I change this size, this will grow this image starting from the top left corner. So let's just make our image a little bit wider. So right now we're at 1,920 pixels. Let's just increase that by 1,000, make it 2,920. And I'll hit OK. And we can see that increased the size of our canvas. We now have this extra white square that extended it by 1,000 extra pixels. So image and canvas are sort of independent in Photoshop. Now, another way I can approach creating a Photoshop document is to start from scratch, start new. So I'm going to go up to File, New, and now this is what it looks like when I create a new Photoshop document. Now there's a few things to pay attention to up here. So right now this is recent, but I can look at different templates, right? So if I look at Print, here is an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper at 300 pixels per inch. There's a legal piece of paper, tabloid, right? So this is a preset that will give you like a piece of paper size. And you'll notice that the color mode, actually it says RGB, but it should be CMYK. if this is going to be for printing. So digital colors display in RGB, or red, green, and blue format. And colors that are going to be printed out onto a piece of paper or a magazine, printed into the physical world, should be treated with CMYK color. This is what printers use. That's cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is black, right? So if you've refilled a printer ink, you'll notice that it's typically CMYK. So if we want a digital drawing, we can choose RGB, and if we want something that we're eventually going to print out, we want CMYK. And this is just going to make sure that we choose colors that are printable. So RGB has a greater range of colors than CMYK. So there are colors that it's possible to display with RGB color that it is not possible to print with CMYK color. So if it's going to be printed out, you want to make sure to choose CMYK. It's going to limit your color choices to ones that are print safe. That way, if you're printing out your beautiful work, you're not gonna take a look at it and notice that all the colors are changed or washed out or different. So it's important to plan what you're designing for. So if it's digital, you could choose up here, web, film and video. This doesn't really matter. What this is mostly doing is defining a size for you, as well as a resolution, but you can change all these right here as well. So let's say I want to just define my own size. Let's make this 1000 by 1000. It's going to be a square. And resolution 72 is fine. And because we're working digital, we're going to leave it RGB. So you'll notice that when I'm on web, the only option is RGB, as opposed to when I'm in print, that gives me the CMYK option as well. So here I can choose my background contents. Do I want the background to be white, black, a background color, a transparent color, or custom? So you can either choose white, black, or transparent. You can choose the other ones as well. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. To start, I'm just going to say white, and then I'm going to hit create. So this created me a layer that is, what did I say, 1000 by 1000. We can check that by going to image size. It's 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels. Perfect. And you'll see my layer's not locked actually here. I can turn it on and off, and I just have a blank spot here, right? So I can place an image inside of a canvas if I wanted by going up to File, and I'm going to say Place Embedded. And I'm going to choose that same picture, Skybox 1, and place it. Now you'll notice that I can move this around within this canvas. And because I chose a different aspect ratio for my canvas is 1000 by 1000, so a square. And this photo, I believe, was 1980 by 1000, something like that. So it's wider than it is tall. So therefore, it's not going to quite fit perfectly on this. Now I could grab these corners, I could size this image up if I wanted, but of course the entire thing will not fit on this canvas here. So I can squash and stretch this, I can move it around where I want. If I click, if I move my mouse out to the edge here, you see how it turns into that sort of curved arrow. That will allow me to rotate this image. I'm going to do Control Z to undo that. I could also change this angle to 0. This is the rotation angle here. See, I can click and drag too. Just change that to 0. Now I can grab a corner here and I can click and drag, and that will size this up or down based on the aspect ratio of this picture. If I want to break that aspect ratio, I can hold the Shift key and I can now squash or stretch this picture. Can change the aspect ratio of this picture to whatever I want it to be. If I let go of Shift, it locks it back into the same aspect ratio. And when I'm ready, I can choose where I want this thing to be. So let me size it down a little bit, and I'll just put it right in the middle here. And when I'm ready, I can choose this check, and that will finalize my selection. So now this is committed to where I've placed this. Now that is referred to as the free transform tool. So if I wanted to do that again and change this to a different spot, I can go to Edit, and then free transform. You'll also see it says Control T, that's the keyboard shortcut. So when I click that, that will then put this bounding box around it again, and I can now transform this again, move it around if I like. So that is the free transform tool. And just to be clear, I said aspect ratio a few times, but I want to make sure that's understood. So the aspect ratio is the ratio between the height and the width of an image. So if the aspect ratio is locked, when you change one, whether it's the width or the height, the other should follow in form. The ratio is maintained. Whereas if I press Shift, I can then break that ratio and I can change the width without changing the height, or I can change the height without changing the width. But if I let go of Shift, it will immediately go back to the aspect ratio. And if I don't want to commit this change, I can hit the cancel, and that'll take me back to what I had before. Now, a very important concept in Photoshop is that of layers. So if you look down to the right here, there is a Layers tab. This shows you the different layers that are in your project and how they are arranged. You can see here we only have one layer here, Skybox 1. Now that can be turned on and off with this eye, and that will make the layer visible or invisible. The layer can also be locked if you see lock here, and that will prevent us from making any changes. You see that I can't do anything on this layer because it is locked, and actually this is a separate issue. This is a smart object, so it won't let me edit it directly. But regardless, if I try to do something like free transform, it will not let me do it because the layer is locked here. So you can lock and unlock a layer with this little lock icon. We also have opacity and fill up here. So opacity refers to how transparent or opaque something is. So if something is 100% opaque, you cannot see through it, right? If we turn this opacity down, you'll see that this starts to get see-through. We can see the white through this. So if I do 50%, it'll be about half as see-through as it was, right? So if we go up to 100, it is opaque. We cannot see through this at all. Now, we only have one layer here, so this is Skybox 1. But if I wanted to add a new layer, I can go ahead and hit the plus icon down here. This is to create a new layer. Over here we have delete a layer. You can create a new group, so a folder that can contain multiple layers to group layers together. There's a fill or adjustment layer and a mask. We're not going to cover those for now, but for now I'm going to add a new layer. So I'm going to hit plus, and you can see that gives me layer 1 and then Skybox 1. Now I can double click here and I can give this layer a name. So I can say test, or whatever, you can name your layers to sort of be more organized and know what is present on each layer. So I'm going to just do some drawing on this layer. So if I go over here, this is my brush tool, and you can see actually there's a B there. So I can press the B key for brush tool, or I can click right here. Now with my brush tool, I have this sort of circle on the screen. Now I can click here and I can change the size of this in pixels, and you'll see the circle gets bigger. Or I can make it smaller and I will get a smaller pixel. A smaller area of pixels to color. Hardness is kind of how hard the edge is. So this is a very hard edge and this is a soft edge. It's kind of fades out over time. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my colors. My colors are down here. So this is my foreground color and this is background color. So you can just have two colors selected at once, but it's always going to draw from the foreground. So I can double click here. That will bring up a color picker for me. Now the color picker, you can either choose based on hue, saturation, or brightness. So if I wanted to do hue, I can choose the color hue in this side thing here. So I can drag, do I want a blue, a purple, red? I can change the hue here, and then I can choose my exact color within that hue over here. Now if I click brightness, I choose my hue on this side, and then I choose the brightness of that color by doing this slider. You can also do saturation. So you just would choose a color and then you would choose how saturated that color should be. Kind of similar to brightness, but instead of fading to black, saturation will be white to whatever color you choose. I'm just going to go ahead and click hue and let's do a nice green color. So if you look here, this actually will tell you if you're out of a web safe color or a print safe color. So if you wanted to get print safe, we can click here and that'll choose the closest green that is print safe to the one you had. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to size my brush up a little bit. Now I'm going to just click and drag, and you'll see that I can just draw a green line wherever I drag my brush. Now you'll see that this is on top of this skybox, right? That is because this layer panel here has a hierarchy to it. It's top down. So the thing that is on the top, you can think of it like sheets of paper on a desk. If this sheet of paper is placed down first, and then this is placed down on top of it, this will appear on top. But what I can do here is I can drag this down, and now that is underneath it. And you can see that the picture here of the sky is on top or higher in the layer hierarchy than this green test drawing here. And I can switch that too. I can move it back and forth, and I can change this hierarchy of layers. But it's important to understand that the layers in this panel here do have a hierarchy, and it is top down. So the layer on the very top of the list will be the most visible on the top, right? And ones that are underneath it will be tucked underneath the previous layer. Now, one important thing to notice is if you have the wrong layer selected, you will not be able to do what you're trying to do. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to open a new layer, and I'm going to lock this one. And now I'm going to try to draw. And it tells me that this is locked, right? But let's say that I wanted to move this green thing instead, okay? So I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to try to select this green thing and move it. So one way I could do that is I can use rectangular marquee, and I can just click and drag, try to select it. And now I want to edit, free transform that area. And it says, I can't transform this because there's nothing selected. Now, I might be confused at that because I thought I selected this green line. But if you notice, I'm on layer 1, which is blank, and not on the correct layer to select anything. So this is telling me that the area I selected is blank, and that is true because layer 1 is a blank layer. So if I really want to select this green line, I would hit it OK. I would make sure to go to the right layer, so I'd select Test. And now if I did edit, free transform, it will let me transform this line around and move it. I'll hit cancel to undo that. But the takeaway from that is that if you are trying to move or modify something and it is not working, you need to check which layer you actually have selected. The selected layer has this lighter color to it here, so you can tell which layer you're actually trying to affect. And you'll notice that when you try to affect a blank layer or move something that doesn't exist, it will tell you. But sometimes if you're getting unexpected results, you want to check which layer you actually have selected, because I've done that many, many times where I am trying to change something and I change the wrong thing because I have the wrong layer here clicked. So pay attention to which layer you're on. If you do something you don't intend, it's very easy. You can just go to Edit, Undo, or Control Z. But this is how layers work. It's very malleable. You can move these around, like I said. Here we'll add another little brush tool here just to show. So B for brush tool, or I can click here. Let's do a different color. All right. And now I can arrange these however I want. Let's say I want the green on top, then red underneath, then the sky, or I could put the sky in between. But basically, the layers work in a top-down manner. The top layer will be displayed on the top, and so on and so forth down. Now, we cannot possibly cover everything in this Photoshop video, so there's a ton of tools that we're going to have to cover in later segments, or you can come into SDM and get lessons for. But I'm going to show you a thing that people commonly like to do in Photoshop, and that is cutting out pieces of one photo and putting it into another photo. So I'm going to just start a new project. So we're going to go to File, and I'm going to hit Open, and I'm going to start with my first picture. So I'm going to take this picture I already downloaded called Desert. I'm going to hit Open. Now I have this nice desert picture, and it came in as my background layer. And now I'm going to add another picture. So we're going to hit this plus down here to add another layer. And I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and I'm going to embed another photo into this document. So I'm going to hit Place Embedded, And now I'm going to choose my blue whale. And these are all free pictures that I got off the internet. So if you go to Google image search and you click tools, you can say usage rights, and there's a drop down. You can choose Creative Commons license. So all these pictures I'm using have been marked as free to reuse, a Creative Commons license. So I can place this wherever I want in the scene. Once I'm happy with it, I would hit the check mark here. Okay. Now I want to cut this whale out of this photo and have it be present in the desert background photo. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this. We're going to start with the most straightforward way. So Photoshop has added some new tools. If we go up here and click and hold, we can see the other tools that are contained within this W tool. So we have a magic wand, a quick selection, and an object selection. Now, object selection is a newer tool in Photoshop that's able to detect edges. So we're going to go ahead and hit object selection. And I'm going to, and I see I have my blue whale selected because it has the lighter coloring on this layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag across here. And now what this is going to do is look for edge definition. So you see it actually found this object pretty well here, pretty well defined. It did include this corner section here, but that's okay. We can manually clean this up afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead. We have this dotted line, moving dotted line. It's called marching ants line, generally is how it's referred to. And this is our selection. So what we're going to go do is we're going to go up to select, and we're going to say inverse. This will select the opposite of our current selection. So when I click this, you'll see that the border now has this marching ants line. And if I delete, so I'm going to, on the keyboard, I'm going to press the delete key. Okay, so this tells me that this is not directly editable because it's a smart object, okay? Now, we're not gonna talk too much about smart objects here, but the way to get around this, you see there's a little icon here. This tells me that this is a smart object. So the way around this is we're gonna right click on the layer. We're gonna choose rasterize, okay? This is kind of a complicated explanation, but for all intents and purposes right now, rasterize layer will take this smart object and commit it to the pixels of the size it is right now, okay? So once I hit rasterize layer, now if I hit the delete key on my keyboard, I will be able to delete those pixels. And you'll see it's not perfect. We still did get these blue bars up here, but we can look at how to get rid of those now. So if I want to deselect, I can go up to select and choose deselect, or I can also hit Control and D to deselect. Okay, now that my selection is deselected, I can go ahead and try to clean up these bars here. Now there's a couple ways I can do this, but the simplest way would to just be use an eraser. So if I go over here to eraser, click that, and right now it's a block, a square block. But if I go up here and I say brush, now I get this circle, okay? And I can just click and drag and kind of erase this out. Now it's not perfect, but that's okay. This is a quick and easy automated selection. All right, and now I have my whale in the background scene here. That's how you cut out one object from a picture into another. Now there's a couple different ways to do this. Let's do it another way. Okay, so I'm going to turn this layer off. I'll just hide it, and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go up to File, Place Embedded, and we'll place the same photo. So I'm going to choose Blue Whale and Place. All right, and I'm going to hit the check. Now let's go ahead and rasterize this just to get it out of the way. Rasterize. Okay. Now, let's say instead of deleting everything, I wanted to sort of use what's called non-destructive editing, so I can sort of show and or reveal this in a dynamic manner without having to delete anything. That may not make sense, but hopefully it becomes clear once I show you what I mean. So we're going to go up to Layer, and in the Layer menu, we're going to choose Layer Mask. And now we have two options, Reveal All and Hide All. So I'm going to start with Reveal All. Now, when I clicked that, you'll notice on my layer here, it added this little white section that is linked to our normal layer thumbnail, okay? Now, this is our mask. Now we have two colors here. We have black and white. It automatically changed our foreground and background color to black and white. So I'm going to go to brush here. Okay, my brush. And I have black color. And you see I can actually select the layer or the layer mask. So I want to make sure my layer mask is selected and my color is black. And now I can actually just draw on this with a brush, and anywhere where I paint black, it will remove that. You see this black line here? That's being used to mask over this layer here, and you can see it blacks it out, right? It reduces the opacity to 0, wherever that black is. Now you can actually do this in stages. If I turn down my opacity to 50%, I can make it half see-through, so it has a blue tint over that. You can layer that up with multiple passes if you wanted to do sort of an opacity from one to another. You could do multiple passes to sort of make it a gradient. Let's undo that though. I'm going to do Control Z. Yep, okay. And I'm going to switch my opacity back to 100. Now, I can also make my brush a little bit bigger, so let's make the size larger. And I can just paint out this layer, or the parts that I don't want to be shown on this layer. Now this probably requires a bit more patience, or if depending on how much hand painting you want to do for this, it's probably easier. There's tablets that you can use that feel a bit more natural in terms of using a pen. I'm using a mouse right now, so it's not ideal, but that's okay. And you can see my result is not necessarily as clean as it could be. I'm being a little sloppy with it. Let's cut off the bottom half, and then I can do Control T, and we can rotate the whole thing, make it look like the whale is coming up out of the sand or something like that. And then let's say I wanted some of this back. I can switch the color to white, and now I can paint this back in if I wanted to paint more of that. So black on the layer mask will black parts out, or reduce the opacity to 0. And white will bring the opacity back to 100 so that you can see it. And this is a nice non-destructive way of, instead of deleting anything, you can just sort of paint things in or out of the scene as you see fit. And you can go back and you could change that if you want to. You could change the other way as well. It's, there's always ways back with saving history and undo and stuff like that. But this is called non-destructive editing, because if we take off this layer mask, you can see that, here I'll right click, disable layer mask. You can see the entire photo is preserved there underneath. It's just this mask that hides parts of it. The last way I want to show you how to cut something out is with a tool called the pen tool. This is probably the most precise and accurate way to cut something out. It just requires a bit more practice, and we could probably do an entire series on just using the pen tool. But for now, I'm just going to show you quickly how it's done, and we can probably expand on this in later videos. But this is the most accurate and clean selection you will get, but it requires the most time. You have to manually do it. So I'm going to go ahead and place embedded and place that whale again. Okay, perfect. And we're going to rasterize that. Right click, rasterize. All right, now I want to create a selection using the pen tool. So if I press P, I can get my pen tool, or I can go over here. And you see that pen tool is P, right? So with the pen tool, you can click and drag, or you can click points to make shapes. Okay, so you see I just made this shape here. I can undo that. I can also click and drag to create curves. So if I click, and I click and drag, it kind of pulls with these Bezier handles and kind of makes this curved style line, right? So you can get really interesting selections with these sort of curves here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use those, and that's a pretty simplified explanation of it. I can expand on this in further videos here, but I'm going to just go ahead and use this pen tool to select this whale here, okay? So I'm using Alt and the mouse wheel to zoom in. So I'm just going to do this sort of quick and easy here. Okay, and once I have my selection made, I can right click and say Make Selection. And you can see that's selected exactly where I did my pen tool. So now I can do the exact same thing where I say select the inverse and I do backspace to delete everything. Oh, okay, this happened because I'm not on the right layer. I'm on the shape layer. So I'm going to go down to here and I'm now going to hit backspace and that will delete anything I don't want from that. All right, and you can see I get a nice clean selection there. So the pen tool will give you the most accurate clean selections, but because you have to do it manually, it can be more time consuming and or frustrating to do. So Photoshop has some good automatic options like the object selection tool here, but they're not always going to be perfect. So it's sort of a balance between how much time you want to spend and how perfect you need this selection to be.